Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Carol and I'm glad to have you here. I hope you will consider subscribing. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. We are coming up on Cinco de Mayo, so I thought we would can up one of my favorite types of cuisine. I love Mexican food, so we are going to be canning up mango salsa today. Now I'm going to be demonstrating the recipe from the Ball Canning website. It might be in their canning books as well, but I'm going to be using the website. I will link the recipe for you below. Before we get started, one of the things that I wanted to note was it is pineapple mango salsa, but when you go to the National Center of Home Food Preservation and you look up their mango salsa, they recommend using green mangoes. And when you can up mangoes, they're supposed to be green. You're not supposed to can ripe mangoes because of the acidity level. So as I was looking over the recipe from Ball, they just say to use 8 cups of mango diced, which is about 6 large. They do not make any mention of using green mangoes. And one of their tips was always begin with the best quality produce at its peak of ripeness. So it sounds to me like they're implying to use ripe mangoes here, which they are adding some acidity with some vinegar, lime juice, and they are canning it along with pineapple. So I'm assuming that that's one of the reasons why they don't make mention of canning, of using green mangoes here as opposed to ripe mangoes. I just wanted to get that out of the way because if you are searching for mango salsa, you will notice that the National Center for Home Food Preservation does state to use green ones. I am not going to say it's wrong to use ripe mangoes because Ball doesn't really specify here. For my purposes for today's video, I did use mangoes that were less ripe. I wouldn't classify them as green, but they were still pretty firm. I chose mangoes that were still pretty firm for that reason. I don't think I would use overly ripe mangoes for this recipe. Number one, really ripe mangoes are very soft. It's a soft fruit by nature once it's ripe, and I don't think it would hold up well to the canning process, even though we're just water bath canning. So, like I said, I'm not gonna say it's wrong to use ripe ones, but I did use underripe, not necessarily green mangoes for today's purposes, and I feel pretty good about doing that. So it's up to you if you want to use green mangoes and kind of following the National Center of Home Food Preservation's guidelines. That's fine. I just know that I was going to get that question, so I wanted to get that out of the way up front. So for today's salsa, we are going to be using 6 cups of pineapple, peeled, cored, and diced. It's approximately 1 large. We need 8 cups of mango diced. That's approximately 6 large mangoes. 4 cups of ripe tomatoes, cored, seeded, and diced. They are recommending about 6 medium. I used Roma tomatoes because I didn't want it to be too watery. So I used about 7 medium-sized Roma tomatoes to get the 4 cups. We need 2 cups of red bell pepper diced with seeds and ribs removed. That's approximately 2 medium. A word on peppers and onions, they can always be interchanged in canning recipes safely. So if you want to use another bell pepper, if you prefer a green bell pepper, that's fine. Yellow, orange, it's totally fine to swap out another bell pepper. We need 2 cups of that. You want to make sure you remove the seeds and the ribs, of course. 1.5 cups of red onion finely diced. That's approximately 1 medium. I did use red because I think it's pretty in this recipe, but if you wanted to, you could totally use a yellow onion, a sweet onion, a white onion, whatever kind of onion that you prefer. Again, onions are interchangeable safely in canning recipes. We need 3 cloves of minced garlic, 4 teaspoons of kosher salt, or you could use canning and pickling salt, a 1/4 cup of bottled lime juice. You must use bottled lime juice in this recipe. Again, it's a water bath recipe, or a steam canning recipe, so the acidity is very important. But make sure you're using bottled lime juice here so that the acidity is controlled. That's the difference between using fresh lime juice and bottled. the acidity is always the same when it's bottled. If you use fresh, it can vary. We need a half a cup of white vinegar of at least 5% acidity. Make sure you read the label. A lot of vinegars these days, they are not the same acidity that they used to be. So make sure that it is at least 5% acidity. Another note about that, you can change it up with a different vinegar if you want to, as long as the label states that it's at least 5% acidity. And then you need 6 tablespoons of fresh cilantro, finely chopped. So in this case, we don't typically use fresh herbs unless a recipe is tested that way. You could also use dried cilantro if you want to. If you don't groove on cilantro at all, you can leave it out entirely. And I guess the one ingredient I missed is 2 habanero peppers, finely diced with ribs and seeds removed. I know habaneros are really, really hot, so I opted for switching out to a jalapeno. I made sure that I did weigh it and made sure that it was the same. Habaneros are a different size than jalapenos, so I didn't feel comfortable just saying swap out 2 habaneros for 2 jalapenos because they vary in size. So I did weigh it, and about 1 medium jalapeno does equate to approximately 2 habanero peppers, which is also 16 grams. Now I did, like I said, use the jalapeno in today's recipe. I had not made this before, so this was my first time making it. Because I didn't want a really spicy salsa. I did find that the jalapeno was not very noticeable in the salsa at all. So the habanero is probably a good idea, which is probably why they used it here, and they're only using 2. It will give you more heat. If you want a very mild, gentle heat in the background, swap out to the jalapeno. If you want something hotter, you could choose a hotter pepper. For those of you who do not like heat at all, you can leave the pepper out completely. Just use the red bell pepper or whatever sweet bell pepper you wanted to use. But the hot peppers, you can leave those out entirely safely. So I think that sums all that up. I'm gonna bring you in close and we're gonna get started, and I'll show you how I put it all together. Okay guys, I have prepped all of my ingredients, so we are ready to get started. We need 8 cups of diced mango, and then we need 6 cups of diced pineapple, 4 cups of diced tomatoes, 2 cups of diced red bell pepper, 1.5 cups of red onion, and then I have 3 cloves of garlic minced here, and I also have 1 medium jalapeno, which is about the equivalent of 2 of the habaneros. You could use the habaneros as the recipe calls for if you prefer. Then we're going to add 1/2 cup of white vinegar, 1/4 cup of lime juice, and about 4 teaspoons of canning and pickling salt or kosher salt. We're going to bring this up to a boil on high heat. Once we reach a boil, we're going to reduce our heat to a very low simmer and let it simmer for about 10 minutes. While that's happening, I'm going to get my canner and my jars ready. Okay guys, once you've simmered your salsa for about 10 minutes, you want it to start to thicken a little bit, and you can feel that it's gotten thicker. We're going to remove it from the heat, and we're going to add 6 tablespoons of fresh chopped cilantro. We are all set for canning. Modern canning guidelines state that you do not need to pre-sterilize jars or lids as long as you are processing for 10 minutes or more, and we are going to be. So I've just washed my jars and I've kept them hot in my canner. I'm going to be steam canning. So I have 3 quarts of simmering water in the bottom of my steam canner, and I'm keeping my jars hot in my canner. You want to make sure you're starting with hot jars. So we want to fill our jars with our hot salsa to 1/2 inch headspace. And you want to make sure you're getting the liquid and the fruit and veggies. Once you reach your 1/2 inch headspace, you're going to take a debubbling tool, plastic butter knife, or a chopstick to release any air bubbles. You also want to make sure that you have enough liquid in your jars that it does cover the solids. Once you release your air bubbles, your headspace may change slightly, so you can add more if you need to maintain the 1/2 inch headspace. I am going to use a paper towel dipped in white vinegar to clean my rims. We don't want anything to interfere with getting a good seal. Then we're going to center our lids. I am using ball lids today. Ball's instructions for their lids is to not simmer them. I've just washed them and set them aside. If you are using 4 jars lids, those do require being simmered prior to use. The Superb lids, you do not need to simmer those either. So be aware of what lid you are using and know if they need to be simmered or not. Once you add your lid, you're gonna add your band just to fingertip tight. And in the canner they go. Okay guys, I did get exactly 7 pint jars, which is what the ball recipe said that we would get, so that is fantastic. Like I stated before, I am steam canning, so I have a dial gauge on the top of my steam canner that tells me when to start my processing time. If you are water bath canning, you want to make sure you have enough water in your canner to cover your jars by at least an inch once you put them in the water. For water bath canning, you want to bring your water up to a full rolling boil before you start your processing time. For steam canning, we have the dial gauge that tells us when to start our processing time. So once you reach the proper temperature to start your processing time, you're going to process for 15 minutes. The other thing I wanted to mention, in both cases, whether you are water bath canning or steam canning, you just want to maintain your temperature. You don't want it to be at a full rolling boil the whole 15 minutes. You just want to stay in your green zone on your dial gauge of your steam canner. We don't want it boiling too vigorously throughout the processing time. So just be mindful of that to adjust your heat once you get to the proper temperature. When we're completed with our 15 minutes, I'll bring you back. Okay guys, we are all done. I did process my jars in my steam canner for 15 minutes, and then I've let them sit an additional 5 minutes or so in my canner, and you could hear they're starting to seal up. This salsa is so pretty and it's really, really yummy. It's a great change from traditional salsa, so I highly encourage you to give it a try. Now, this salsa is fantastic. You could eat it just like any traditional salsa with chips. It's great paired with chicken tacos. It's fantastic on fish tacos or also on a pulled pork sandwich. The little bit of sweetness from the fruit pairs really well with barbecue pulled pork. So I hope you will give it a try, and happy Cinco de Mayo. Take care guys, and I will see you next time.